Coach, let's start with the announcement Friday. How much angst was there, and what does Greg signing mean to the program? And I'll add on to that. The G League element has kind of brought a new element into recruiting. Can you kind of sum up what Friday meant, knowing he also had a pretty significant financial opportunity?
It was a great day. We were super excited. Obviously, I've been really excited for a long time about Greg. And, he really wanted to have some real suspense to it and some real drama to it. So it's one of the first times that, we've been able to sign a recruit where a recruit was making a decision where we really didn't know for sure. We had a good feeling about it. We felt good about the relationship that we have and that Greg and his family have allowed us to build with them. But we didn't know for sure until he announced on Instagram Live, and we found out like everybody else did. Really excited about what he brings to our program. He's a great kid. He's somebody that wants to be a part of something special, something bigger than himself. He texted me yesterday and he said, "What impact do I need to make on this team?" And it's good to have someone that has that type of mentality.
All right, Coach, good to see you. The recruiting against the G League aspect, I'm sure that's different than just recruiting against Oklahoma A&M and your other traditional rivals. How do you adjust to that?
It is different for sure. And I think the biggest thing is understanding that the pathway for one young man may be different than the pathway for another. And this isn't going to go anywhere. I think this is going to be a legitimate option for elite players in the coming years, and an option that some of those guys choose to pursue. So, the thing that's going to be important is having a sense for where people's mindset is early on in the process, and then, how things continue to evolve. At the end of the day, you have to have an understanding of, maybe what somebody values. And, when you look at some of these guys, one of the advantages of coming to a place like Texas is there are a lot of, things you can get out of that experience beyond just what you do on the court and beyond just your NBA goals. A guy like Mo, he came here for a lot of reasons, and he thought about the long term. He thought about some of the connections that he would be able to form with the network of people we have, both basketball-wise and otherwise, here at UT. So I think it's just about finding out what people really want and listening and paying attention, and then reacting and adjusting accordingly with your recruiting.
Bob, go ahead, please.
Hey, Coach. I'm interested in the dynamic of next season with, I don't know, whatever, 13 deep now when you had Greg. What did you learn as a coach? Because I know you can say, let's go have competition and the best guys are going to play and all that stuff, but it really seemed obviously that you had the 5-game winning streak at the end of the year, the chemistry there. What did you learn, not just specifically about this team, but as a coach, about the dynamic of finding 5, 6, 7 guys in a rotation, and how you think you'll approach that any differently next
year? Yeah, Bob, that's actually one of about 2 or 3 central questions that I've been thinking a ton about this spring. And, it's one that you have to take past experiences and try to learn as much as you can from them, but then also understand the future may have certain similarities and there may be certain differences. I think the thing about basketball is when you add one significant player, it does change the whole dynamic, the whole chemistry of your team, maybe more so than sports where there's more guys playing at one time. But what we learned from last year was having less guys available to play actually helped the guys that were playing lose themselves in the fight. And so one of the things that we're really going to have to create and work towards creating is having a group of whatever the number is, but certainly it's going to be smaller than 13, guys that understand that, hey, I'm going to get an opportunity to go out there and play. I want to be a part of something larger than just what I can do out there. I understand there's going to have to be a level of sacrifice, but I also know that my role is very, very important. I think at the end of the year, those guys felt that. They felt like, hey, my team needs me. That's a big, big thing with the, the Jerichos of the world. And it sounds simple, but just being needed, being someone that the team is depending on. So we're going to have to do a great job of making sure that we get to a core group of guys that have that feeling and then can go play with incredible aggressiveness.
Travis, go ahead, please.
Shaka, can you just take us back to that day at the Big 12 tournament when kind of everything changed and it evolved so quickly, but kind of realizing you weren't going to get to play, and then ultimately that the season was shut down, and what was that like to have to tell your guys?
Well, that was a day and a kind of period that I'll never forget. I'll take you back to the day before. We were in our hotel in Kansas City. We practiced. Some of you guys were there. We had a brief practice session on the court in the Sprint Center. If you remember, those of you guys that were there, Brock turned his ankle during that practice session. And so at the time we had 8 guys, and he turned his ankle, and you could tell right away it was pretty significant. So now we were down to 7 healthy scholarship guys. But there was still a feeling amongst the guys of, hey, let's go after it, man. And, we've been a little bit shorthanded for a while now. And, Brock's been phenomenal. And it was pretty cool. Like, it did show, like, how strong of an impact he had because the guys were very affected by when he turned his ankle. But again, at the same time, all of us were like, all right, well, we still got 5. And so let's go out there and see if we can go win this thing. Obviously, we'd had a couple close games with Tech earlier in the year. Both of us were in a position where we were tied in the league standings, and it was a really, really important game for us. So there we are in the hotel. We're doing our normal preparation, our normal scouting work, and somebody yells out, hey, the NBA just suspended their season. And we're like, why? And then shortly after that, it was the news came out that a player had tested positive for COVID-19. And so it was really impactful to our players because, as you know, our guys follow the NBA very closely. They all want to play in the NBA. That's their dream and that's their goal. So, we had to try to manage distraction a little bit there. Obviously, we were staying in close contact with our administrators about what was going to happen. And I remember waking up that day. In fact, that day was the last time I cut my hair. That's why I'm wearing a hat right now. Bob, you and I might have that in common. But I always cut my hair on game days, and we were getting ready. But you kind of had a feeling that we may or may not play. And I remember, CDC and I talked early that morning, and he said to me, "Hey, where are your guys at right now?" And I told him, I said, I'll be honest with you. There's some mixed emotions. I mean, these guys are competitors. They're basketball players, but they also kind of recognize intuitively that we're in an unprecedented time. We've never really dealt with something like this. So we go to the arena. The guys are warming up like they normally do. And I think, anytime you get closer and closer to a competition, the players being the competitors that they are, they lock more in on, hey, we're playing. And, there's no fans. There's not going to be any fans. But, hey, there's the other team on the other end of the court. We got our uniforms on. We're going to do this. And we kind of knew as coaches that at any moment that could change because the ADs were meeting, over the course of the morning to try to kind of figure out what was best. And obviously with the NBA having canceled, or suspended their season, you knew that college basketball might not be too far behind. So as you guys know, literally about a half hour before the game, I got a call from Chris, and he said that the tournament's been canceled. So we called the guys off the floor. We brought them into the locker room, and Chris and I both addressed our team about, what was going on. And you kind of knew at that point, even though the NCAA tournament had not been canceled yet, you kind of knew like this was the end of the season. So it was a unique time. Usually you're speaking from an emotional standpoint after a win or a loss. In this case, it was an emotional feeling, but it wasn't so much about, whether you won or lost your last game. It was just more about the uncertainty of what was going on, and the fact that even though we didn't have any seniors on our team, our guys' season was cut short. And for a group of guys that puts as much into basketball as they do, that was something that was really significant.
Shaka, I want to go back to Greg and the skill set, because when you look at Jarrett and Mo and Jackson, I realize there's no guarantees of one and done, but those guys offensively, I'm talking about, they needed people to really help them, get them involved, and maybe they weren't developed offensively as much as a guy like Greg. How big of a difference is he coming in with his skill set that reminds you a little more of a guy that can do different things than the big guys that are relying on post feeds and maybe offensive rebounds and stuff like that?
Well, every one of those guys is different, and remember, Jackson didn't come in here at all to be a one and done. He just happened to get on a rocket ship, and by the end of the year, he was going to be a top 10 pick. For Jarrett Allen, if you remember, he came in with a very, very evolved offensive game, but it was a matter of kind of catching up to the speed and the physicality of college basketball. And once he did that right around Christmas time, he really took off. I believe he averaged 16, 18 points in the Big 12 and had double figures in all but one Big 12 game. Mo's game was never, mostly predicated on offense, although he could certainly score the ball and helped us to some extent in that way. But as you mentioned, Greg does have a diverse skill set. I think maybe the best thing that he does is attack with a level of violence. That's a word that we've used in the past to describe the aggressiveness with which we want our guys to play, whether it's going at the basket, whether it's finishing, whether it's offensive rebounding, whether it's fighting for the ball or fighting for position. And Greg, to this point in his career, has gotten better and better at being violent out there on the floor. And that's what we're going to want him to do from day one when he steps on the court.
Coach, I think Greg mentioned that you guys first started talking in 8th grade for him. When did you see him play and you were like, this kid is special?
I don't remember exactly when it was, but it might have been the AAU summer going into his freshman year, or it might have been at some point early in his freshman year. But, it was very, very clear at that point that he had an ability that was special. He had great athleticism. He was a guy that played the game with a passion and a drive and a confidence. The way it works with those type of guys is you hear about them first. I don't remember exactly who it was, but somebody, from around the area called and said, hey, this is going to be the next great player in Austin. And so I remember Jay and I, started talking about him. And, obviously at that age, there's a lot of rules in terms of, like we can't call them at that time. They have to call us. But it was pretty clear when we did start watching him play that his athleticism and, again, his drive and competitiveness with which he played was special. But I'll tell you what, it was also a lot of fun watching him grow and develop over the years at Vandegrift and on his AAU teams as well, and see him become more and more assertive.
Bob, go ahead, please.
I'm not sure if you were celebrating too much when he made the announcement. You didn't hear him say this, but he did say he's coming to win the national championship.
I heard that.
How it's great that obviously all kids have that mindset, but is that a realistic thing? Is that something that you talk to your team about? Is that particular, winning 6 in the NCAA tournament, those kind of things? Or do you really kind of not let them go there? Like how much will you let him come in and have that influence of that mindset of we're going to do big things?
No, we want that. I mean, you want at this level in a program like this, you want guys that have those type of aspirations. But remember, it's only as effective or productive as your willingness to do the things that bring those type of aspirations to life. And that's for guys that are seniors in college, or that's for guys that are incoming players like Greg. So part of our job as a coaching staff, particularly with Greg being a new player, is helping him understand exactly what goes in to bringing to life what he wants to create for our team. I love the fact that he's team oriented. I love the fact that he's talking about those things. That's the first step for sure. And now it's a matter of, again, with him and all of our other players, being connected around having a consistent buy-in to being that team. To me, it starts with, can you have a group of guys out there consistently that lose themselves in the fight? Again, to go back to the end of this past season when we only had 7 or 8 guys, those guys did a great job of that. Now the dynamic changes. You have Greg, you have certain guys back from injury, and we need to make sure as a group, coaches, players, everyone, that we're consistent in that way. And that's the only way that you can create the habits and the excellence that you want to have to reach the goals that he mentioned.
Travis, go ahead, please.
Shaka, with everything going on right now, just how are you kind of staying connected with your team? How is all this going right now in these, new times? And then also understanding there's so much unknown, but what are your thoughts at this moment on college basketball and what it looks like in the fall?
Well, we try to stay as connected as we can with our guys. Obviously, they're still finishing up the academic portion of the school year. So, probably the number one priority right now is making sure that they're on top of everything they need to do with their classes, which are all online right now. We're doing a lot of Zoom calls with our guys. I've got one with Jericho in 23 minutes. So, it's been pretty cool communicating with those guys in small groups, occasionally with the whole team. And then, especially with individual guys, just one-on-one, and getting a sense for how they're feeling, what's on their mind, what they're up to. I think there's a real tendency, especially with young people, to fall victim to being a little bit bored when you're stuck at home. So I think a big part of our job as coaches is at the same time to understand that and help them understand that that's a realistic human reaction to this, because certain things that they normally do outside of the home have been taken away. But then also try to counteract it, because there's so many things that we can do if we're willing to get outside of our comfort zone that are the opposite of boring. And so the Zoom calls are good from the standpoint of just really taking their temperature on how they're doing with that type of stuff, giving them some ideas. We watch some tape each time we get on the Zoom call. So we look at some video, both of guys doing things on our team from this past season, and then also some video of maybe guys that they aspire to be like. But that's an example of some of the things we're doing. We're using this Bulls documentary, like I'm sure a lot of people are, to just spur conversation and talk about how some of the lessons that you can take from that documentary apply to our team or individuals on our team. It's interesting. There was, obviously, you guys saw an emphasis on Dennis Rodman last night on one of the episodes, and a few of the guys texted me while that was going on. They said, well, that's Brock. And so it's pretty cool, just for our guys to kind of recognize, little components. Obviously, the 98 Bulls, it's one of the best teams ever, but, just to see some commonalities that we can take from that. In terms of college basketball, we're really just trying to take things one day at a time, 1 week at a time. I think you have to look at the way things are adjusting and evolving in maybe 2 or 3 week increments and really fight the urge to get too far out ahead of yourself and start, jumping to conclusions about what's going to happen in October or November or beyond. Obviously there is a lot more uncertainty than there would be in a normal year. In a normal year, you can assume, hey, at this time we're going to be doing this, at this time we're going to be doing that 100%. There is no such thing as 100% right now. And I think that's something that we all have to learn to be okay with. But at the same time, fortunately, there is quite a bit of time in between now and when we would normally be playing. So we want to, A, help our guys continue to move forward, B, be ready to be flexible and adjust to whatever changes occur, and C, just try to keep everyone as positive as possible, because I think even though there's some unknowns, one of the best things that all of us can do is stay highly optimistic that the time will come again where we will get to be on the court. The time will come again where we will be able to be together. And I'll tell you what, we're all going to have an added appreciation for all those little things when that time does come.
Does that mean you're promising some 0-point 20 rebound games from Brock?
Man, that's an amazing stat. And I was a Rodman fan before, but it just shows how incredibly unique he is.
Hey, can I ask one more question, Scott?
Last one. Go ahead, Roger.
We get in the vacuum. These guys are basketball players. We realize they do other things. Then you see something like what Will put on his YouTube page, pretty deep thinker. And then, Sam Ellinger, what he's doing, Charlie Collier with the GoFundMe. And sometimes we lose sight. In these times, I think different things come out. It's kind of cool to see a guy like Will Baker show a different side of him.
Well, he's an incredibly talented young man in a lot of different ways. He's for a long time had a real interest in film, and that's actually his area of study. Right now at UT, for people that don't know, UT has a phenomenal film program, and it's interesting during the recruiting process, Will compared ours at UT to UCLA's, and he felt better about ours. That's one of the reasons that he came to UT. But that film that he created, I watched it probably about 5 or 6 times, and just marvel at he's a talented guy, and he's got a lot of great stuff in him that he can bring out in different ways, and it's exciting. That's one of the cool things about this age group for these guys is just kind of becoming who you're going to become. And so for Will, everybody on our team watched that film, and we shared it with other people that had a real interest in it. And I think it's had a positive impact on a lot of people.
Guys, thank you very much for your time. We'll wrap on that. Everybody have a great day. Appreciate your time today.
Hey, Bob, I'm looking forward to comparing hair with you in a couple more months.
Let's
Mine
see
is
yours.
really
Come on,
bad.
Shaka.
It's really bad.
Go with Bob.